Wellywood is at the centre of New Zealand's £1.5 billion a year film industry. And of course, the films at its heart, making the most of New Zealand's rich and varied landscapes, are the Tolkien trilogies.
Incineration.
Oh, aye, I'll melt the flesh off your bones in the blink of an eye. Something I know a thing or two about, having spent almost 2 years as a dwarf in The Hobbit. So, I'm off to meet a local boy who grew up just outside Wellington in Pukerua Bay.
Hey, Jimmy, how are you?
Hello, boss. Nice to see you.
To see you too.
Wow.
The director of the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films, Sir Peter Jackson. Or should I say, boss. I mean, you started making films in Wellington. What do you think, is it now about New Zealand that lends itself to filmmaking?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, when I started making movies, there wasn't a film industry here at all, really. It was just beginning, actually. It was like 1977 was the beginnings of our film industry, and I was a kid, you know, making Super 8 movies. And so we didn't really have any sort of tradition, no film schools. But I guess we, you know, the one thing with New Zealanders is we don't have much respect for the way things ought to be done. We just go ahead and do it.
When I do interviews, like say for The Hobbit, and people ask me about you, I often say, well, he's a very proud Kiwi, and I know that to be true, but what do you take that to mean exactly?
I just think we have a healthy disrespect for the way the rest of the world do things, and we just do it our own way. And I think that's born of the fact that New Zealand is a very isolated country, and it's only just, you could say, really, in the last 20 years that transport and flights and communications and the internet has really made us, you know, part of a more contained world. I mean, you know, in the old days, it took 6 or 8 weeks to get here. So I think New Zealanders, by nature of their isolation, are used to just looking after ourselves and doing things our way. Yeah. And that's, I guess, the Kiwi spirit, is doing things our way.
By the same token that New Zealand lends itself to filmmaking, because of course, you know, you've got many stars in your films, some great stars in your films.
We're blessed, Jimmy.
but clearly, I think an audience would say that New Zealand itself is the real star, isn't it? You know.
To some degree, I think, yeah. It's hard for New Zealand to overwhelm some of the fine actors we have, but the trees and the grass tries very hard. Tolkien is such a European English kind of book, and the property and associated with that part of the world. But I think that New Zealand was ideally suited for it because it's a primitive European landscape. It's kind of not like, you know, it's not a desert or a strange kind of a foreign landscape. There's a lot of things here that are kind of European, but in a very primeval, kind of primitive way. Yeah. And I think that, you know, that probably is not too far from what Tolkien was imagining when he wrote the books. Sometimes you want to film somewhere where there's no road. Yeah. And sometimes you're filming in a place where you're literally not sure if any human being has ever actually walked on these rocks before, which is kind of exciting. I mean, the blessing with doing these movies for me has been going to places in New Zealand that I would have never got to for any other reason. I really feel like I've seen my country in a way and through eyes that I would never otherwise have done if it hadn't been for these Tolkien movies.
Thank you. Cheers, boss.
Okay.
The boss.